Welcome to the Gary DeMar Show, your 15 minutes of sanity each weekday. 4 out of 5 doctors surveyed recommend this show, along with a large dose of common sense to help combat the insanity served up by the mainstream media. And now, with today's daily recommended allowance of rationality, here's Gary DeMar.
Well, welcome to today's show. And one of the things about American Vision over the years is that we've developed quite a following. Lots of people email me on a regular basis. I try to get back to those emails as best I can and answer their questions, or to put them on another route where they can find an answer to their questions. And as a result, there are lots of people who hear other tapes, go to lectures, they read this article and so forth, and they'll forward those to me. And one individual sent me a portion of a lecture that William Lane Craig gave dealing with the issue of preterism. Now, William Lane Craig is here in the Atlanta area, and in fact, I would certainly like to have William Lane Craig as a guest in studio to talk about what I'm going to talk about today. Dr. Craig is a well-respected apologist. I'm glad that he is on our side dealing with some of the fundamental issues of the day. While I never met Dr. Craig personally, I did see him on a panel debate with Christianity Today, sponsored this when I was at the Christian Book Expo in Dallas over the summer. And Christopher Hitchens was there. We were debuting Collision, and they had a panel discussion with Doug Wilson, Christopher Hitchens, Lee Strobel, and William Lane Craig, and it was on the issue related to atheism. So I got to see Dr. Craig in action, and his formidable mind on a variety of subjects. And so I was very curious as to see how he would deal with the issue of preterism. Now, for those of you who aren't up on what preterism is the opposite of futurism. These two prophetic positions are really the standards of today. There are varieties of preterist positions. I'll talk a little bit about that. And there are varieties of futuristic positions. Dispensationalism is probably the most popular futuristic position. It made popular, of course, in the last, since 1995 with Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins, the Left Behind series. Mark Hitchcock writes in this area on a regular basis, has a number of new books out, one dealing with the year 2012 Mayan calendar prophecy, which, by the way, he does not support that. I've only just been able to do a cursory reading of his book. I'm going to try to get it. I'd like to have Mark on the show. He's written a book on the cashless society, but he's a standard takes a standard dispensational position. And that is the prevailing position in our society today. You hear it on radio and television. William Lane Craig, my guess is, I don't know this for sure, but he seems probably to be maybe in the historic premillennial camp, does not hold to a pre-tribulational rapture. So he's either amillennial or some form of historic premillennialism. Since this isn't really his position, his area is more in apologetics, and I'm sure he's using the eschatology issue and dealing with apologetics because it always comes up. Preterist, on the other hand, believes that the majority of the prophecies, both in the Old and New Testaments, were fulfilled, either in the context of some Old Testament event, like the position I take on Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Gog and Magog prophecy. I believe that was fulfilled during the period of Esther, the Ezra and Nehemiah period, where dispensationalists would see that as yet to take place. And so because I believe that prophecy, and it was a prophecy when it was given, has already been fulfilled, that makes me a preterist. That is, that the preterism simply means that something is in the past. And so when I get to the New Testament and I see prophetic passages like the Olivet Discourse found in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke chapter 21, I believe while this was a prophecy when Jesus gave it, and when the Gospels were written, these events still had not taken place yet, but I believe that those have already been fulfilled in the events surrounding the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And so while they were prophecies when they were given, and since they have already been fulfilled, in my estimation, that makes me a preterist. Preterist simply means past. Now, there are varieties of preterism, and not all preterists agree on every text, but full preterists see everything, including 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 18, Acts chapter 1, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Pretty much all prophetic texts are fulfilled in the events surrounding the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. I do not take that position. I still have lots of questions about those passages, and I continue to study those passages, but I just have not really felt that the full preterist position, at least on those passages, are convincing enough to me. And so let me start with this. This person who sent this to me was very kind to transcribe William Lane Craig's comments. I don't know if this was a Sunday school class or special class that he was teaching. The audio is available online, and for those of you who want to hear the whole thing, and that's something you really ought to do if you're interested in this topic, you can email me, and I'll see that you get the link. So let's go with this as the logical fellow that Dr. Craig is. And again, this is not an attack on Dr. Craig at all. This is, in fact, I'm hopeful of some sort of exchange and engagement on this issue. This is not a topic that, at least in my estimation, that he has spoken on a lot because it is in the realm of apologetics, because you're dealing with the authority of Jesus and the authority of the Bible on this issue. It comes under the broader scope of apologetics. And liberals have used the issue of apologetics over the years in order to discredit the Bible. Even in the collision debate with Hitchens and Doug Wilson, Christopher Hitchens brings up Matthew chapter 24 and states that Jesus is a false prophet because he claimed that he would be coming back before that particular generation passed away, and that he didn't. So therefore, why should we believe Jesus on anything since he was wrong about that? And Doug Wilson took the preterist perspective and say, not at all. Jesus did predict that he was going to come back within that generation, and he in fact did, if you understand the biblical concept of coming, especially in the Olivet Discourse, in this case, Matthew chapter 24. So it is in the realm of apologetics that this issue has to be dealt with. It's not purely an academic subject because much of the Bible deals with prophecy. So I have the utmost respect for Dr. Craig on this. I just disagree with the kind of the basic remarks he's making. There's nothing really comprehensive about this. These are just, I think, seed thoughts on this issue. I would like to have seen something dealt here with the partial preterist position, the position I take, rather than dealing with the full preterist position. And so I think those two get mixed up because there are lots of preterists, me, for example, Ken Gentry, and many, many others, and lots of the people that we quote, we hold to a partial preterist position. So some of his arguments here I would agree with, but he doesn't really deal with a partial preterist position. So let me just kind of go through this with his first reason. He says, first, it seems to me clear that the coming of the Son of Man is a visible coming to earth. Now let me give two arguments on behalf of that. The first argument is going to be a grammatical argument. I hope you follow me here, he says. The verb to come, just like the verb to go, is what we call a perspectival verb or perspectival word. That is to say, it is relative to the perspective of the observer. When someone talks about something coming, that means coming to where the observer is. The person who is uttering the sentence uses the word he comes. Where if someone were not the observer, he would say, well, he went or he goes. You see, the word coming is a kind of perspectival word that indicates the perspective of the observer. And then he gives Acts 1:11. So, for example, take a look at Acts 1:11 for an illustration of this perspectival character. Here is the ascension of Jesus, and after Jesus ascends into heaven, the two angels appear and they say, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into heaven? This Jesus, who was taken up from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. And where you see perspective nature of this verse, he will come just as you saw him go. Well, it's very clear in that particular context what Jesus is saying. You saw him go up this way, he is going to come back this way. But let's push the antithesis with Dr. Craig on all this and this idea of perspective and look at certain passages, because I believe that while there is this grammatical usage of this word, the perspective of the audience, I think there's something more fundamental here. What is the audience perceiving? That is, what is the basis upon what they're hearing and how should they interpret that? And so it's not just the grammar that's important here, but the actual use of a particular phrase in the Bible itself. And let me give you a couple of examples. And I've used these before, so these certainly aren't new to anybody, but they're important in this particular context. Let's take the issue of perspective again. Put yourself in the place of the Egyptians, and put yourself in the place of a Jew, and then put yourself in the place of the argument that Dr. Craig gives about perspective and what you would expect to come to you and in what way this would come to you if you read this or heard this for the first time. In Isaiah chapter 19, verse 1, the oracle concerning Egypt, behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and is about to come to Egypt. So here it's very specific. The Lord is mentioned here, cloud is mentioned here, and the Lord is about to come to Egypt. So we know the perspective here. The perspective is Egypt. And we know that there is this coming. It's a coming from wherever God is down to Egypt. And the word come is used here. The idols of Egypt will tremble at his presence, and the heart of the Egyptians will melt within them. Now, if you take the perspectival position that Dr. Craig is uttering here, you'd have to say, well, the Lord is actually coming on a cloud and it will be physically present in Egypt, so much so, because the word presence is used here, so much so that the heart of the Egyptians will melt within them. Well, I've looked at a lot of commentaries on this, dispensational as well, and I haven't found anybody who sees this as a literal coming down to Egypt. And yet the language there is pretty evident that if you were to take the approach that Dr. Craig is taking here, that you would have to see some visible representation of Jehovah. Now you might say, well, that visible representation is in the judgment itself. It's not necessarily in the person of Jehovah. It's in the judgment that comes. And that's what most Bible authorities, commentators on this particular passage state. And so I could make the same claim when we get to Matthew chapter 24 about the Son of Man coming like lightning, is to say it's not an actual physical presence like the incarnation, but it's in the way that he comes, and that is he comes in judgment swiftly, and he comes with power, and he comes with a visible understanding that he is in fact behind this. But again, if you just take the idea of perspective here, and you take the arguments that Dr. Craig gives here and a little later, Isaiah chapter 19, verse 1 would give the reader the view here that you should expect the physical appearing of Jehovah to Egypt in such a way that the idols would tremble at his presence. I mean, you really can't read it any other way unless you read it in terms of this judgment coming. Now, I'm going to spend some more time on this, and so tune in tomorrow. I'm going to look at a couple of other passages, and you can look these up in the interim. Micah chapter 1, verses 3 and 4, Revelation chapter 2, verse 5 and 16, and Revelation chapter 3, verse 3. And I'm going to deal a little more with Dr. William Lane Craig and some of his criticisms of preterism, and I'm very thankful that he has done it in a scholarly and gentlemanly and a Christian-like way. But tune in tomorrow, and I'll go through some of these additional arguments in dealing with William Lane Craig on preterism.